Hello, everyone. Hi, Justina. Hello, Ome.
Hello, Justice.
How are
Good
you,
afternoon.
Ome?
I'm fine.
Nice to see you.
Yeah. How are you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. Very
It's
busy
been
with
a
our
while.
new release. It has been a
Oh,
while.
that's good. You have a
Yeah,
new
no.
look.
Thank you. It's just my hair is tied up.
Oh,
It's getting in the way. It's getting very long. I need to go for a haircut sometime.
okay.
Let me share my screen so long, and then let's see. Hello, Sandy. Hey, Rodney.
Hello, greetings. How's everyone?
Hello.
Good, thank you.
Hey,
How are
Sandy.
you? Hello, Colin.
I'm well.
Hello, everybody.
Okay, hello. Right, let's put those. Which way around do we want to go? What's my agenda for today? Kubernetes working group first. We need one more person for a quorum. I think. Rodney, you are the delegated representative from Foley, who is our other technical steering committee member. So we need one more. That would be either Matt. Greg has sent his apologies, so that won't be Matt. Greg. Hi, Sam.
I just everyone.
Hello, Sheriff. Hello, Matt.
Hello. How's it going?
Alrighty, we can begin. So as I mentioned, Greg sends his apologies. Rodney is here representing Foley. That does give us a quorum. Welcome to everybody. I do see some new faces in the call. Justina, hi.
Hi.
Welcome to the
Hello.
Technical Steering Committee.
Thank you.
And then Sheriff, you've been here before, I believe. So hello again and welcome back.
Hello, Justice. Thank you. Glad to be back.
And also Ome, who we haven't seen for a couple of sessions, but also welcome back, Ome. Nice to see you again as well. And
Yeah.
welcome to everybody else. Hello, Majid.
Hello, Justice. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I've been asking for, but I think we'll do that after. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
I can see that there's a message from you in my Slack. I am not deliberately ignoring you. But so, showing up at the technical steering committee meeting to tell me to read my Slacks is probably not a terrible idea. Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, so this is the technical steering committee meeting Thursday, the 14th of May. We have a fairly short agenda, but I expect that it will be somewhat dense, and we have a lot of ground that we would like to cover today as well. Starting off as always with our Linux antitrust policy notice. As a open source organization offering a software product free to the market, we do engage across the commercial spectrum as well. If you have any questions about the Linux antitrust policy or antitrust in general, you can contact a legal representative that you have access to. On our agenda for today, we're going to do a quick bit of feedback on the Tazama 4.0 public beta testing program report. There's been a lot of activity over the last week in particular. Some exciting changes in the sandbox as well, so deployment of some additional functionality. So we'll be sharing that with you. We also will go through just to reiterate the establishment of the Kubernetes deployment working group. The only person in the meeting at the moment who has previously volunteered is Rodney, but that's, by proxy Foley. We might actually want to check in with Festus to see if he is still interested in participating, but I would like to get this particular piece of work underway. So we're going to talk a little bit more about greasing the wheels a little bit and getting this on the road. And then finally, just going back to our technical steering committee backlog review. We had started this process previously, so all of the work that had been logged for the technical steering committee is sitting in a unprioritized queue. Some of that work had already been prioritized, so we're just going to see how far we get through that queue so that we can at least have an understanding of all of the work and get a sense of how we want to prioritize it in our next technical steering committee meeting. Sandy, I'm going to hand over to you. This is, I would say, your baby. So please tell us, how is the beta testing going? Stats on the screen.
Great. Thanks, Justice. We've seen a lot of activity in the last 2 weeks. We're now up to 8 tenants with 2 that we were creating in Keycloak just half an hour before this meeting. So up to 10 different organizations with a full set of users testing across all of the new components. We've resolved 3 bugs and there are currently 9 open. So those are GitHub discussions, which is the mechanism that we've proposed and put forward for anyone to raise any questions, any feedback on any functionality, the bugs. So anything where something doesn't appear to work the way it should. Thank you, Justice. So here are our current open discussions. So within each of these, the screenshots, the explanations, etc., to help the PACES team debug or clarify if something is a bug, if it's a new feature enhancement, etc. Then in terms of transaction volumes, through the TMS API, we've had 345 transactions evaluated. So there was a batch of transactions evaluated last night that has confirmed labeled fraud in it. So that enables us to actually confirm in the case and investigation management system where alerts are actually being created for those transactions that were evaluated. So as of this afternoon, in the case and investigation management component, there are 147 cases that have been opened. And so those are for alerts that triggered. So some of them are actually manually created cases, where I was trying to test the functionality to say if something wasn't picked up as an alert, but it's picked up later, then, those manual cases are then also visible. So as Justice is bringing it up, I was working through the test data this afternoon to try and create cases and tasks for investigations for various scenarios for fraud and AML and fraud. So yeah, so there's quite a bit of activity in case and investigation management. In Rules Studio, there are 4 new rules that have been created. So less activity in the Rules Studio, but we are seeing rules being created. And then since our last technical steering committee, a number of new connections and cron jobs and push and pull jobs have also been created in Tazama Connection Studio. So we are seeing some activity there. Any questions, comments? Just anything from your side?
No, there's a follow-up slide here, so maybe just a little bit of additional clarification on the functionality here. I think one of the reasons why the Rule Studio and the Connection Studio have been a little bit slower in taking off is we have been waiting for the deployment of Build 1.1. So Build 1.1 was a feature that we had discussed here at the Technical Steering Committee a couple of months ago, and it was about how to co-locate or coexist a variable data pipeline with the current existing fixed and structured data pipeline. So as some of you may know, the Transaction Monitoring Service API currently traffics 4 specific ISO 20022 messages. Those messages are effectively a hard-coded data pipeline built specifically for high performance and also for a straightforward mapping from a module loop implementation. We then implemented the Rule Studio and the Connection Studio to be able to give people access to configurable and variable pipelines. That required us to implement those variable pipelines in adjacent to the structured pipeline, but in a way that doesn't break the existing flow. So that then became our base message implementation, which we rolled out in Build 1.1. So in the last week, we had refactored the end-to-end pipeline in the core engine to now also include the base message implementation. And that also involved a rule processor refactor. We had optimized the rule processors that we already had in the system by removing some of the per transaction validation on the rule configurations and moving that into a validation on database read. So where we were previously doing all of that validation every time a transaction is evaluated, we are now doing it only once when that rule configuration is read from the database, and we are expecting to see some performance improvements as a result of that as well. We also resolved a long-standing build issue where the rule module that was baked into the rule processor would sometimes be the incorrect package. So we now have the rule processors identifying themselves when the rule processor starts up, so that you will have a running rule processor that you can be assured is working up front, rather than discovering later that the wrong package had been built into the rule processor from the build process. We have also, and Sandy mentioned this in her report, we had deployed the batch PPA, which is our batch payment platform adapter, which allows us to ingest batch transactions into the system to AWS as well. That required a little bit of a refresh. The batch PPA has not been updated since the release of Tazama 3.0. So we had to refresh that up to the latest sort of build standards in the rest of the pipeline, and also implemented the authentication mechanism that we had elsewhere. To date, the payment platform adapter for batch processing wasn't an authenticated service, so it was more of a developer utility. So we are trying to look at maybe making that slightly more production-grade component now. This is the first step. We're able to deploy that and then also use that to ingest about 5,000 historical transactions into the sandbox, of which 100 of those transactions were then evaluated for fraud and money laundering behavior. That evaluation, I was actually quite surprised, went up at a rate of about 50 transactions per second. So for the sandbox, that's actually not bad at all. Our previous iterations of the sandbox, when we were still running on ArangoDB, achieved maybe 2 or 3 transactions per second. So I think at least from the Postgres perspective and improvements that we have made on the pipeline so far, we have seen a significant increase in performance in the ingestion as well. We did also uncover a connection shortage in the Postgres DB side, so we've increased the connections to from 100, which is the default, to 1,000. So I accidentally DDoSed our Postgres server yesterday, but that's all fixed now as well. And then just now recently, Sandy mentioned that we created a couple of tenants. So we have a standard tenant pack that we create tenants for part of the beta testing. And we've also now created that in a script. So through either Python or Node, you can create all of the tenants in Keycloak through the Keycloak API directly in your sort of a full stack deployment or your demo deployment. Quick pause here before we move off the beta program. Any questions? Any feedback from anybody who has had an opportunity to explore the beta? In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you. Okay. Quick note on the Kubernetes deployment here. So we want to set up a session to start working on the Kubernetes Helm deployment. The broad objective here is we now have all of our functions containerized in our full stack Docker Tazama. So these can now be reliably and repeatably deployed. We want to use that as the foundation to transition to a Helm-based or a Kubernetes deployment. At the moment, what that has meant for Tazama in the past is we have a specific Kubernetes deployment for every different cloud provider, and then also an on-premises one. So we have Helm charts for AWS, we have Helm charts for Azure, we have Helm charts for GCP, we have Helm charts for DigitalOcean, which is the most recent one that we added. And then we also have Helm charts for an on-premises deployment. And unfortunately, largely, these Helm charts are virtually identical. So having 5 repositories to effectively do the same thing is turning into a bit of a maintenance nightmare. And also hampers our ability to effectively test these things because we need access to all of these different cloud providers to be able to test it on that particular provider. So what we would like to be able to do here is to actually, at the end of the day, come up with a single, more universal approach that can be applied to any cloud provider, and then also separating out the infrastructure composition piece into a infrastructure as code step that we could manage and script through something like OpenTofu, which is also a Linux product. So this particular working group will then work together to achieve that goal. Foley had volunteered to participate in that, and we've also had Festus from IPSL volunteering. I will also be participating because I'm very interested in the outcome here. But if there is anybody else in the session who would like to volunteer for this, please let me know. And where you can do that is, let me go here. In our Technical Steering Committee repository, you will find a discussions, and I have already created a discussion for the Tazama Helm-based deployment. So you can either contact me directly, DM me on Slack if you want to volunteer here, or you can just put your name in here. So what we would like to target for a kickoff here is Tuesday. Let me just get the date. Tuesday, the 26th of May. We would like to kick this off. So we will send out an invitation to all of the volunteers for Tuesday, the 26th of May. So please let me know if you are interested in participating and then helping us transition from our full stack Docker to our Helm-based deployment, which is our, how should we put it, production-grade deployment of Tazama for high-scale, high-performance systems in the cloud and on premises. Okay, if there's anybody brave enough to put up their hand right now, I'd be most grateful. Otherwise, if you are shy, you can message me on Slack. Hey, Ome, thank you very much. Ome is not shy. Thanks, Ome.
Yeah, I'm not shy.
Yeah, thank you. We will put you down for that.
All right then, thanks.
Any questions or observations about the Helm-based deployment here? So ultimately, the process will be this team will work to put this deployment together, and then we'll give periodic feedback to the technical steering committee meeting on the progress that they have made. So after the kickoff on the 26th, the next technical steering committee meeting, I think, is the Thursday immediately after that. So we will have feedback on that initial session. We should have a decent view of the objectives that everybody had agreed on, and then the approach and the process that they're going to follow. And there will also be somebody who will own that particular work stream as a lead. So that's the feedback that we can look forward to there. Any other questions from our forum around this particular work stream? Rodney, question. Shoot.
Yeah, just a quick one. Maybe you know now, maybe it's something that's going to be, decided later on. But do we know if we want to support the different components that Tazama has? I mean, like how the Docker stack you could deploy with Elastic logging, for example. Is there like a standard deployment, which is the main focus? Or do we also want to include things like opting into stuff,
Yeah. So it will be opt-in. We expect that in our experience to date, people want the core engine and at least the case management. And if they're taking the case management, then they probably also want to think about the business intelligence, analytics, and reporting, and then maybe the tooling on top of that. So there are a number of distinct component groups so that we would want to probably turn into a number of options. But the core engine would obviously be the jewel in the crown. That's the real work of the Tazama project. And then people can elect to deploy all of the related components based on their own needs. There are obviously instances where somebody has an existing case management system that they want to integrate with. They should be allowed to do that. We don't want to bog them down with our case management system for no reason. But in the event that they don't have a case management system or a data warehouse, we can offer them ours as an option. So yeah, it'll be optional, sort of a pick off the list. Thank you. Right. And then moving on to our last activity here. I don't know how long this is going to take, but I did want to put this up last because I suspect that this might take us for the rest of our session here. So you will see here, those of you who had attended the previous TSC will notice we had created some of these backlogged items here already. If you have, maybe just as a reminder, if you have any ideas or suggestions or features or enhancements that you would like to propose, you can propose them here in the Technical Steering Committee meeting session. Right? So we'd already shown you where this lives here for the working groups, but you can make a recommendation or a suggestion in this forum. Or you can straight up log an issue here in the Technical Steering Committee meeting backlog. These issues, if you add them here to the TSC prioritization project, you can tag them as to be prioritized, and they will then come up in a list where we will review them. We will initially triage them. We may have some questions for you, some additional feedback, and at the point where we are ready to propose or pitch this at a TSC meeting, we will then decide where that will end up on this table. So at the moment, you will see that there are quite a few items that still need to be prioritized, and we'll be going through those. Then there are some things that are kind of already in progress, some things that we think will probably likely get implemented, but we've already spoken about those. It's just a question of finding the right person to implement or somebody who has the capacity or the appetite. And then there's a whole bunch of things here that we as a TSC still need to review. So what we'll do is as soon as we are done with the to be prioritized section, we are going to work our way through the to be reviewed section and prioritize these to say, what are the things that we as the TSC think we need to start focusing on next? And that will then end up at the top of this list here. So I'm going to go through oldest first. Some of these items are really old. That's interesting. This has happened to me before. Right, so I have created this issue to refresh the batch PPA. And then I believe I may have created it twice because I forgot that I created it. No, thankfully, no, I did not. Okay, let's start at the top because these are the oldest ones. Okay. This is a ticket for Tazama Automation Security. There are a number of issues and tokens all over the place. And we actually have a wide variety of tokens that are currently in use specifically for the automation of our workflows. One of the challenges that we have here is a lot of these workflows are actually tied to a specific user. Currently, that user is me because I've been doing a lot of the work to actually refresh these workflows. Previously, that user was Scott, who used to oversee our DevOps on the system and our CI/CD and automation. So it's quite a challenge that when people depart from a project or not, then these workflows end up in their name, and then you need to go through all of these and clean everything up and move them to somebody else's name. It would be better, I think, if we could have this linked to some kind of GitHub bot that is dedicated as a Tazama resource. So basically, this is about making sure that all of our automation and all of our security around that automation and also the responsibilities and the role around that automation is properly considered and then consolidated. So I would like to say, where do we think this ranks in terms of our priorities? High or low? And is there anything that you would pick as this is more important than? Any thoughts? I kind of always feel like if we're talking about security, it ends up being high. But
Yeah,
does
that's why I
anybody
just
have a
put in the
specific?
chat.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it needs to go toward the top of the priority list because the security issue and deployment issue go hand in hand. So I think either having a bot or something at least assess it and complete it for us is a must-have.
Alrighty. We have a proposal. Any reactions, good or bad? We have a support. Great, thank you. So top of the pile. I'm okay with that. That seems like it's useful. Okay. Right. This is interesting. We've actually already done this. So maybe also just to brief everybody, the reason for this change is traditionally we were focused on building out the product. So a lot of the work we were doing was in the dev branch, and we focused on that as a priority for contribution. So whenever you pulled down the system, you would land on the dev branch, which means that you are ready to work. With our transition now more towards an implementation focus, and as we are wrapping up bespoke development or pure development focus for product growth in the with the release of 4.0, we are transitioning to the main branch being the default. And in this case, if you are now pulling down any of our code, you are landing on the code that you would deploy with, not the code that you would work with. So the main branch is our current focus. This is already done. So just a recap. It's our first thing in the done column. How exciting. Okay, this is more of a housekeeping thing, and this is from Ben. This is probably work that we need to do from a housekeeping, so maybe another layer of work below what we are doing right now to organize the tickets here. There is work across a number of repositories elsewhere in the system as well. There has been sort of an organic accumulation of issues that have been logged in a number of centralized repositories, but also a number of project or repo or component-specific repositories. I think we will probably come back to this to review those. I know that Sandy had already gone through the system or through a lot of these once already and cleaned them up. So I think it's just a question of checking to see what is left. So I think we need another, just another pass before we can come back. So I would like to put that list together. And if anything needs to move into this particular project, it'll come up here as individual issues to be prioritized in the future. So I'll take that one for now. Okay. This is a big one. Hands up all of the developers who have had to type this in multiple times.
We just need to
And
change
please,
that.
yeah. Please, Rodney, give me your feelings about the mouthful on the screen.
Yeah, I totally get it. Yes. But also in the same vein, me and Tad brother have been through a lot, remembering
Yes.
all the good times. Yeah. But yeah, that is incredibly long. It was like it stood out amongst all the other processes.
Creates a whole lot of issues for us. And in particular, one of the things that is important to note here is I think about a year and a half ago, we actually renamed the other mouthful, which was the channel router or the channel aggregate. I can't remember even what it was called. The CRISP, the channel router and setup processor.
That's how bad it was.
Yeah, it was really bad. And the reason for that was we were planning for a transition from pure transaction monitoring to event monitoring. So you would also see that now in the delivery of some of the Tazama components where we are talking about the dynamic event monitoring service. We have the event director, and we have the shift from just niche transaction monitoring to event monitoring at large. This processor is the last one in the chain that we need to address. So it still references transaction as an artifact in the first place. It is slightly long. And based on what its purpose and its function is, and also compared to what people are calling other processors in similar kind of products for a similar function, I would like to propose here that we rename this to Event Adjudicator.
So it acts on the event as it happens. From
It
that name.
wraps it up and it makes a decision. It makes a decision at the end of the chain that says, do we want to generate an alert about this? Do we want to send it somewhere else? Do we want to leave it alone? What is the decision? And it also collects all of the feedback from all of the typologies. So it makes a decision about all of the information that it has access to. So I almost want to say, can we make a decision about this? But I feel like this might be a quick win. So I'd like to propose that we consider this at a future TSC, but to the top.
Yes. I think it's hits the nail on the head for naming convention, so you're good.
Thank you. And thank you, Colin. And Rodney was also happy, Ajit. So we'll move this for quick evaluation as a quick win. And also, it would be convenient if we can get that done before release 4 so that we can bundle that change into release 4 and then be done with it. I'd hate to release 4 and then have to come back and do a major refactor of the platform just to rename a single component. Right. This is a change in the abstraction. So we had previously separated the Keycloak functionality from our authentication library into a plugin. And the intention here was to be able to say, well, if you don't want to use Keycloak, you can use any other kind of authentication tool, as long as you are able to build your own plugin that can then interface with the Tazama ecosystem, which worked really well and creates a nice, neat separation and also helps with the product being slightly more sort of third-party provider agnostic. But in subsequent review of the components, there are some lingering issues. So the abstraction still left a couple of artifacts. So there is some clear keycloak naming in the core component that hadn't been moved into the library components. And we are actually also still importing the authentication library directly into the authentication service instead of into the authentication library. So there's a bit of a mess of spaghetti happening between all of the services and subcomponents. So for this is about cleaning that up as well, and then being able to launch a very clearly separated functions for these components. Does anybody have a strong feeling about where we should be prioritizing this? It does create something of a maintenance issue for us, and also there is some bleed between these components.
So, Justice, if it's being distributed, I would put it toward either middle or middle high, because if it's impacting someone else as a third-party component and then it's coming back and being distributed to clients, I would say definitely needs to be high.
Yeah, I would almost want to put this into release 4 as well.
Yeah.
Provided we do an assessment of how much work that is going to be. But yeah, maybe in the next 2 or 3 technical steering committees, if we can actually get around to this issue,
I would almost call it like a
win.
hot fix.
Yeah. So somewhere in between these 3 things, like if somebody would like to make a recommendation about priority, I almost feel like the security stuff should always be a little bit higher than this, but this is also our security subsystem, so maybe the 2 are on par.
It's right underneath both of those, maybe.
Yeah, right underneath. Yeah, the third.
Thank you, Josh, Majid. Okay. If anybody feels strongly otherwise, please let me know, but I'm going to drop this in here at the moment. Great. Why do I have 2? Oh, they're sitting in 2 different repositories. So maybe also a reminder, if you're doing work in a specific repository, there should be a ticket in that repository. So this affects both of those repositories and needs to be evaluated as a set. And that one as well. Okay, that helps a lot. We've just cleared out 3 items, 3 birds with 1 stone. Right. Okay. This came up almost coincidentally. Somebody was trying to deploy Tazama and they were complaining that they couldn't get it to work because they were trying to do it with Jetstream. And we were very surprised because Jetstream actually isn't the way that we propose or recommend people deploy Tazama. We are using NATS. So just to explain to everybody what the difference is, NATS and Jetstream are part of the same software product, right? Both of them run inside NATS, which is our pub sub software. It is the software that we use to route in between the components. So that's how components are talking to each other. You would drop a message off for one component, and that component would see that the message is addressed to it and pick it up off the subject and then work on it and then drop it off for the next component in a NATS subject. The primary difference between NATS and Jetstream is NATS is basically fire and forget. So you do not get feedback from the downstream components that your submission had been successfully received. It is, in theory, supposed to be a lot faster, but also comes at the cost of some robustness and also some resilience in your data flow. So fire and forget. Jetstream has more assured delivery. So you then have the opportunity there to also get feedback to say, yes, you have successfully picked up the message that I left for you, which comes with some advantages. This has come up again more recently as a issue, I think, in the batch processing. So when we are submitting transactions to the transaction monitoring service in batch format, we do them at the same speed that the transaction monitoring service itself is able to accommodate. So if you do that really, really quickly, that's great, but there is work that gets done behind the transaction monitoring service that is slower than the transaction monitoring service's ability to ingest that data. So if you are running a really large batch, you have a risk of overwhelming the interior services of the system. So even though the transaction monitoring service and the database is quite comfortable to accept that load, as soon as they commission the evaluation, that becomes a lot slower and the system then backs up. But because we are running NATs, there is no mechanism to be aware of the backup. You can't see that your messages are not being collected. There's no transparency over those subjects to see that they are getting fuller and fuller and fuller. And the only real way to get that kind of signal is through something like Jetstream. So what we would like to do here is when we had originally considered NATs over Jetstream, it was for performance reasons. And this here seems like an opportunity for us to review this again to make sure that maybe now, with some of the other changes that we had made in the platform and some of the other efficiency gains that we had acquired, this might be an opportunity for us to get back to the NATs versus Jetstream conversation. Okay, so this is initially, I would imagine, a research project of sorts. And then would have to come back to the technical steering committee meeting with a recommendation of a approach. Is it good to go? Is it recommended? Whatever the story might be. So where do we want to put this in terms of priority? And this might be useful for some feedback from implementers as well. How prevalent do you think batch-based ingestion in your environments would be? And that is in particular the area where we would have to fix this. In the absence of a clear answer, does that mean it ends up at the bottom?
I hope not.
We do have a task here for a monitoring tool for NATS and Jetstream. It might be worth combining those two tickets.
Yeah, it seems like a feature side of the NAS and Jetstreams to see the feedback tool, so I would say yes. I agree with that.
Yeah, because the one might actually solve the problem without us having to change the pipeline. Rodney, Ome, Majid, any thoughts from your experiences with end users?
Maybe in a dev environment where I myself am the end user. I do also want to note that with like Jetstream, it can give you the ability to, retry transactions if, something dropped off somewhere. You do get that, just as an extra feature for Jetstream, where it might be useful.
How
Yeah.
useful is it compared to everything else? Majid, go for it.
Oh no, let's Rennie finish and I'll...
No, that was my question. So I'm like polling, how useful is this compared to everything else? And Majid, if you have a comment on sort of its relative importance.
I mean, as you mentioned, it would be good to revisit, and I'm very interested to see, especially with as you mentioned, in actual deployments, and but I do think in order of ranking, it's okay where it is. I do believe the other activities do take precedence, so I'm just going to comment about the order of ranking, but it's just good to know, and definitely. Once you're in a space where we do need to evolve and be dynamic, it's good to revisit that. Yeah, I'll just end there. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much.
Justice in
So
the chat.
here,
I was going to ask, does any of our other tooling serve the same purpose, or is it just an extra catch? Basically, when you implement versus with Jetstream versus NATS, or do we have another tool that even sees on top of that?
we kind of have application performance monitoring, but the APM is, I don't know that it is as good at identifying real-time back pressure as a
Okay.
result of your pipeline slowing down. You would need somebody who can monitor it, who's actually watching those dashboards at the time that these things are happening, or you should be implementing alerts out of that dashboard so that if
It
you
triggers
start
something. Yeah.
seeing a triggered back pressure, then you can respond to it. But even that for me is it would be easier to automate that at the point where the back pressure is happening so that you can even go back as far as the TMS API and say, we need to rate limit your batch, for example, right? To say we are going to slow down your rate of ingestion because you are the reason why we're being overwhelmed. And that for me feels like it needs to be a real-time control. It needs to be in the process, not a secondary signal out of your analytics, for example. But I think that would be part of the conversation as well. So what alternatives do we have to manage that kind of back pressure in the system?
To manage throughput. Yeah, I completely agree with that too.
Okay. Shall we put it here where the other one was? I kind of feel like some of the things that we have discussed already were relatively more important.
Yes.
Are we okay here? Okay. And then we'll combine these two issues. It seems like a good opportunity to address them at the same time. Okay. This is more of a housekeeping thing. When we were reviewing the batch PPA processor, we identified a number of improvements that we had made for repository health in general, and then we applied them specifically to the batch PPA as a targeted refresh. So it came up with a little bit of a checklist to say that these are all of the things that you would want to do if you wanted to bring a stale processor up to date. And then we put them into this document. And the idea here is for our community to maybe just review this and make some suggestions or recommendations on how we can keep on improving this process. What are the things that we need to consider when we are updating a stale repository? But also, if we are creating a new repository for a new component, what are the things that we need to make sure is in that repository up front? So this is basically just a request for comment. I don't know how I would prioritize this. This is probably compared to actual real work to make a system improvement overall, probably of a lower priority. But still, from a housekeeping and a governance perspective, I think something that is useful for us to also just get to and make part of our documentation and our policies going forward. Feedback and comment from the floor, please. Okay, I'm going to put this at the bottom, and comment and like on your own time if you have any strong opinions or if you feel like this is something that you have a some feedback or a value or an opinion. Please weigh in on the comment itself on the issue. You can comment at the bottom here if there are things that you think we should consider. All right. And then the final one here in the list. This is for the proper production operationalization of the batch PPA. So even though we had now implemented the basic authentication required to be able to attach the batch PPA to our authenticated services, which is something that didn't exist before, there is probably still quite a bit of work to do here to bring this component up to production grade. So for example, at the moment, the way that the batch processor works is you can send a bunch of transactions into the system, and all of the transactions except the triggered transaction is submitted directly to the database without an evaluation being required, which is really great for performance because I can ingest all of these transactions directly into the database at a rate of about 100 transactions per second, which is really quick compared to the time that it takes to evaluate a transaction, which obviously reduces that throughput. So I don't have to evaluate them. I can just post them straight to the database. And then I follow that up with the transactions that I want to evaluate. But in the current implementation, it's all or nothing. So there is an opportunity here to say, well, we have 4 different message types, and we may actually want to put this one in the database and put the second one into evaluation and put the third one into the database again and put the fourth one into the evaluation. So there isn't a lot of fine-grained control over the batch payment platform adapter. It also doesn't accommodate batch submission for our new variable transaction pipelines, which is also something that we might want to consider for the future. But overall, the batch payment platform adapter as a former developer's utility needs an update to make it properly production grade and ready to be used in a production system where somebody might want to load transactions into the system either as a take-on exercise if they're starting out with a new Tazama implementation, or as a catch-up exercise, or even as a batch evaluation exercise if they are receiving transactions from a remote client without real-time access and they still want to ingest that as transaction history. For example, if you're providing a managed service in a sort of a lower technology environment. So there's a reason for batch processing in a production context as well, and it would be useful for us to have a component that can handle the work with that level of governance. Where do we see this in terms of priority? And we did implement a sort of an immediate stopgap solution. So we now have a solution that we didn't have before, which is great. How do we rate improving this to a production grade component in terms of priority? Any thoughts or opinions from the floor?
Just from a product owner point of view, being able to ingest transactions more than one at a time, just purely from a testing point of view. I know we're saying we now have a development tool, but I do see a use case for batch ingestion that I think is quite a high priority.
Cool, thank you. Is there anything that you would want to sort of like trump with this particular one based on our current list? Sort of like if we scroll down here into the middle, for example. More important than performance benchmarking capability? More important than the authentication library abstraction?
I would say after security and before performance benchmarking.
Here. Any reactions from anyone?
Yeah, I do agree. Can it be, once this is production grade ready, can it be part of the performance benchmarking capability since you're batching these transactions as well?
That's actually a good point. It would become a dependency for the performance benchmarking anyway, because you want to be able to use this utility to do your performance benchmarking. So yeah, that actually then means that this one has to go before that. That's a great catch. Thanks, Majid. Yeah, so over here.
I agree.
Okay. I am very happy. Nothing left
Sorry,
to
Justice,
prioritize.
before
Hello.
you
Yes,
move on
Rodney.
there. Maybe a tangent, but related to the batch VBA and TMS in some way. Why would we not want to perhaps collapse the batch VBA into the TMS? Like I'm looking for maybe justification to keep them as 2 separate services.
You are going to enjoy this section of the document. Where is it? Batch functionality added directly to the transaction monitoring service. Arguments in favor, arguments against. Yeah, I had the same question. So it's like there are 2 ways of doing this, right? So one, you can actually add this to the transaction monitoring service directly. So the batch functionality runs in the TMS and leverages all of the functionality of the TMS since it duplicates a lot of that work already. Or even as an alternative, you can put it adjacent to the TMS and you can put your transactions directly into NATS. So instead of chaining the batch processor and the TMS together, you can put them side by side and then both of them talk to NATS at the same time. This is where our conversation about Jetstream came from, right? Because this is apparently could be a very good viable option for high-speed batch ingestion, provided we can manage the back pressure, and that would require Jetstream. So there's a dependency issue here, but I would like to invite you to have a look at these. So there are some alternatives that we can also consider. And if you have a specific sort of a challenge or a veto to either one of these two, please let me know.
Justice,
you can also comment on this issue.
In
Josh.
that case, if we use it as a use case, so if I was to decouple the two, like it states in the document, and had a historical throughput of historical data that I wanted to send through batched one night, we run these batches at 12 a.m. in the morning or whatever, would that allow the concurrency issues or anything from the decouple part to allow better performance versus it being tied into the TMS?
Yeah. So ultimately, performance is something that we are very concerned about. We do want to make sure that the system always retains in good health. And also bearing in mind that as soon as you put a batch of 50,000 transactions into the system designed for real-time evaluation, there's a risk that you might actually impede the performance of your regular transaction traffic as well. So the system is performance sensitive, and we want to implement the solution that would be the friendliest option to preserving performance. Okay, but thank you. So thanks for the feedback in the comments. If there are any of these issues that anybody is particularly keen on, feel free to adopt it. You can also, there's nothing that stops you from working on any of these issues on your own and then preparing this issue for a TSC review by yourself. But just from a TSC perspective, as we have all agreed, then this becomes our list of priorities for things that we are going to be reviewing, right? Starting at the top, what that then means is this issue, renaming the transaction aggregation decisioning processor, will come up at the top of the list at our next technical steering committee meeting, either for discussion or straight ahead if everybody is comfortable that this is fully and completely documented enough, we will proceed to delivery. And we will go ahead and implement that. And then we will move down to the next one. So if you are of the opinion that this one's going to be a shoe-in, you could prepare for the next TSC by reading ahead and then also looking at the Tazama automation security. So that is going to be our process now that we have a fully prioritized list. We're going to start at the top and we're going to work our way towards the bottom. Just from me, thank you very much to everybody who did participate in this process and helped us to put this list together. I feel like very encouraged and positive about this structured approach. It also sets the scene for collaboration and allows everybody to properly prepare for a TSC meeting as well by looking at this board and knowing what the item is that's coming up next. So feel free. This is going to be our next big item that we are going to discuss. And I think that brings us to just under the time for our evening. So unless there's any feedback, I'm going to give it maybe a minute. Anybody else has anything that they would like to raise? If you do not want to raise it here, feel free to raise it as an issue or a discussion in the Technical Steering Committee repository on our Tazama LF organization. Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day and evening. And we will see you again in 2 weeks, except for those who are participating in the Helm chart working group. We will see you on Tuesday in 2 weeks.
Okay. Thanks everyone. Thanks, Justice.
Thanks, everyone. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.